Hello, my name's Bronwyn Cooper. I'm a podiatrist here in Sydney who for over 10 years now has cultivated particular expertise because of my passion for the effects of footwear on people's movement patterns, whether they're runners or whether they're a walker. Could just be someone who's actually riddled with arthritis, for example. And I see lots of patients who come in with these very problems, and they can be in weight-bearing joints ranging from the back, hip, knee, down to the foot. It doesn't just have to be the foot. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about minimalist shoes. I'm going to also explain what physiological shoes are, because both of these types of devices can be absolutely invaluable for helping you to restore correct movement patterns, whether it's running or walking. And a lot of people are clueless that they're walking with a gait that may in fact be causing part of their problems. And generally, if that's the case, it's actually coming from the wrong shoes they've been wearing. So first up, most people are sadly not even aware there's two public health policies about shoes. The first one has been around since 1991. It was published in America by the American Podiatrists, and it's about what features are good for the development of strong, healthy feet. So it's the Pediatrician's policy on kids' shoes. And there's links to these, by the way, on our website at drfootsolutions.com.au, and you'll be able to find that information there. The other policy is on running shoes for runners. Now that was only published in March in 2014, so last year, by the American College of Sports Medicine. But how sad is it that we've got to the point where we've had to publish a position statement on what constitutes a good shoe for running. So first up, what does? Well, for running, taking up running, really you want to be in as close as possible to a barefoot scenario. And in fact, if you look at the absolute authorities on this area, they'll say that a shoe that replicates barefoot running or actual barefoot running is the ideal way to promote correct movement patterns, and they're right. So where does that mean that minimalist footwear comes in? Well, minimalist footwear has just got a little bit more structure to it generally than barefoot shoes. Minimalists have minimal heel height, minimal arch support, minimal cushioning, and they're generally shoes that have got a wider anatomical last, so they've not been compromised for the sake of fashion at the toe box. There are a number of particular brands out. A lot of people will have heard of the Five Fingers. They will also have heard, some of them, of the Vivo Barefoot. So this truly is a minimalist shoe because there's absolutely no support, as you can see. And you know, for decades we podiatrists told people these were bad features, or this lack of feature was a bad thing. But if you want to develop strong, healthy feet, it's not. However, this may not be the shoe for you to wear if you're riddled with arthritis, for example, or have other chronic injuries. That's where you may have to switch to a physiological shoe, which I'll explain shortly. One of the real areas of confusion is that people often just do not know what the word drop means. If they go into a sports store, the sales assistant will often talk about the drop of the shoe, and instead of calling the heel height of the shoe literally that heel height, which traditionally has been measuring from the ground as to up and under the heel as to how high the heel is, then in the case of modern sports shoes they actually measure it the reverse way. So if there's no heel height, it's called a zero drop, and they're measuring actually from the heel down. So this shoe in the ultra range has a little bit of support, but it's still in the minimalist category. It's got zero drop like the Vivo Barefoot, and it's also like the Vivo Barefoot anatomically lasted. So zero drop are actually also available in business shoes and casual shoes and little kids' school shoes across the range. It's not just sports shoes. So here's a wide lasted ultra with a casual upper that's available. Here's a Vivo Barefoot child school shoe, for example, and obviously they do sports shoes, etc. Interestingly, Vivo Barefoot is owned by 6th or 7th generation Clark's family of Clark school shoes, and if you really want good information on why the foot should be allowed to control its own motion and to give sensory feedback that's so important for proprioceptive input, or that sense of where you're putting your foot in space, where you're putting your body in space at least, and also about natural shock absorption, then I really would suggest you look at Vivo Barefoot's website. They've got a great video on there as well that shows someone running barefoot on a treadmill with poor form and someone running barefoot on a treadmill with good form. Don't think running barefoot instantly equates with good form if you're already running with poor form, particularly if it's because you've been wearing perhaps an elevated, overly protective heel height shoe overly protected shoe, and even a 12mm or 8mm heel height in a running shoe, in a stability or motion control model, will be tilting you forward, as I'm sure you would appreciate. Okay, the other thing is there are minimalist shoes that also have 4mm of heel height, so a little bit of heel height can be a good thing. We'll just use this Skechers Go Run as an example. So 4mm of heel height, and this is actually a midfoot striking shoe. And once again, you'll see there's flexibility in here, and yet when this shoe is on the floor, you'll find that it feels like it's giving support. You'll notice in all of these shoes there's not any particular stiffener in the back of the heel counter. That began to be put in when plastics were put into shoes about 30 to 40 years ago, but now the shoe companies, as you might know, are pulling that sort of stuff out. So that's just giving you a very quick overview on Minimalist. Barefoot literally means a shoe that replicates barefoot movement and barefoot running. Now, generally they will have a thin Vibram type rubber puncture resistant sole, and they often are either replicating toe pockets to put your toes in, such as the 5 fingers and a few others. Even some people would argue a Vivo Barefoot might be a barefoot shoe, but it does have a little bit of structure to it, and a lot of these shoes come with various removable insoles as well. That would be a good point for me to also explain, though, at this point, that we rarely use those here in my clinic because we specialise in restoring foot function orthotic systems as well, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it's things like the barefoot progressive strengthening system. It's a neutral type insole with a special little pocket for a series of increasingly strong resistance plugs to be placed in there. It comes in 2 lengths. There's 3/4 length, there's full length, and you can see here that it's clearly a system where there's a series of different colour-coded plugs that make it very simple for patients and runners and wearers to use. So this sort of rehabilitation approach is so important that it's been put into the soles of shoes now for about 18 years overseas. They first came to Australia 11 years ago in the form of the MBT of Switzerland. So physiological means a shoe that's going to change movement patterns, and it usually does it by means of a rocker. So if I show you the original cutaway of the MBT, you'll see there was a plate in the middle, but the technology has moved on since this was done 10 years ago. And here's a little wedge or a heel sensor of unstable Pilates mat rubber. And what happens is you rock through this plate for anyone who's wearing a Cam Walker boot, anyone who's in night splints, things of that nature you'll recognise straight away that this is spreading the peak force over the entire foot. So we use them for people with weight-bearing ulcers, we use them for people with heel pain and heel pathology, midfoot and also ball of the foot, because this is going to rock you through an area if you've got a Morton's neuroma, painful big toe joint or bunion, all of those things. Now, as the technology's changed, and even this is now lighter and it's done a little bit differently to the old model I've got here, you've got to the point now where there's a French brand called Hoka, which technically is a running shoe, but they now have put out some all black leather upper models for people to wear in business, that people who are in hospitality and teachers and nurses that are on their feet a lot, riddled with problems, just love these sorts of shoes as well. So again, in the physiological category, just does not have the unstable Pilates mat rubber underneath the heel, and that's a model of or at least a cutaway of the technology in the sole. Now, that's still only, depending on the model, between 2 and 6 or 7 millimetres of heel height, but this whole offset or ramp looks like it's going to be higher, but as you can see, there's quite a platform in under the sole of the foot as well, the ball of the foot. And the uppers are generally sport models, so they'll look a bit like this sort of thing. That's one of the women's models. Now, one of the really important and exciting products and devices that came into Australia back in 2008, and I've used them in my clinic in that time, is also a rocker, and it's mostly in the form of a thong strap or a sandal strap, and it's called the FitFlop. So it's the English brand that's a takeoff on their name for a thong called a FlipFlop. And the FitFlop has the Pilates mat rubber in the middle, so on this particular model it's the white bit, then it's firm under the heel, and then it's semi-firm in the grey bit. So in effect it rocks you forward as well. And you'll notice to achieve this, the technology is such that most of the soles have to be reasonably bulky. There are instances, and very few instances, where none of these shoes are appropriate for someone, particularly someone who drags their foot and doesn't have clearance as they swing their foot through in gait. And I certainly am careful with elderly patients whose eyesight might be bad. If visual impairment's an issue, they might want to be able to feel the floor a lot more, even if these are clinically indicated for their painful arthritic knee or hip. So the FitFlop, once again, can change muscle firing, for example, in their clinical tests of the glutes in the butt by over 30% compared to a motion control type shoe. The thing about all of this type technology is the minute a patient, in my case is in the clinic, or someone walks into our retail outlet suffering with weight-bearing pain in any linkage between the big toe through to the back, in almost every instance they will feel a difference immediately in that area. And in some it can be quite profound. Some of these shoes we get the patients to test them walking down the stairs if that's when their hip pain's worse, and they can tell us which of the models actually feel better, that are all based on this principle. So in summary, Physiological Footwear has been overseas for over 18 years. Brands that we stock include MBT, Joya, FitFlop, Hoka. To a lesser extent, some of the models of the Skechers Go Run. Certainly the Skechers Go Walk do not fall into this category. They're in the Minimalist category, and we have a full range of all of those shoes here as well at Dr. Foot Solutions. In subsequent videos, I'll talk a bit more specifically about individual features of some of these shoes, and you're welcome to look for the details in these further videos.